Trump alerts Canada. Poilievre blasts CBC in explosive live moment. A central criticism of Carney's administration centers on the persistent regulatory and bureaucratic bottlenecks that continue to impede high-impact infrastructure projects across Canada. Pipelines, LNG terminals, and other vital developments face extensive permitting delays, leaving investors increasingly frustrated and hesitant to commit funds. Poilievre argues that creating new government offices or passing legislation such as Bill C-5 cannot substitute for the straightforward action of removing unnecessary obstacles. True economic progress, he emphasizes, comes from letting private sector projects move forward efficiently, without being slowed by excessive government interference, outdated regulations, or red tape that currently stifles national growth and undermines investor confidence. This bureaucratic sluggishness has wide-reaching consequences for Canada's economy and global competitiveness. High-value capital, investment opportunities, and overall business confidence are increasingly directed toward countries that demonstrate regulatory efficiency and predictability. Investors require clarity, speed, and stable policy environments, qualities Canada currently fails to provide consistently. Poilievre warns that without a clear, decisive federal signal showing that Canada is genuinely open for business, international investors will continue to prioritize nations with streamlined processes, leaving Canada at a disadvantage in securing critical projects, cutting-edge infrastructure, and long-term economic growth. The problem extends beyond domestic economic concerns and touches Canada's strategic role in global energy markets. Allies consistently request Canadian LNG and natural gas as cleaner, reliable alternatives to Russian oil, yet Canada has failed to deliver sufficient supply due to regulatory paralysis. Poilievre stresses that this shortfall forces other nations to depend on authoritarian suppliers like Russia, Qatar, and China. By blocking domestic energy projects and maintaining restrictive environmental policies, Carney's administration inadvertently strengthens reliance on less trustworthy partners. This missed opportunity undermines Canada's potential to establish itself as a stable, reliable, and strategic global energy supplier capable of supporting allied nations effectively. Poilievre also highlights the contradictions embedded in Canada's energy policies. Domestic pipelines and refineries face heavy restrictions while finished green technologies, solar panels, wind turbines, and EV batteries are imported primarily from China, which dominates global supply chains. This dependence on foreign production weakens domestic manufacturing, raises costs for Canadian consumers and businesses, and paradoxically fails to reduce global emissions because energy demand shifts to countries with higher carbon footprints. Poilievre argues that a rational, pragmatic energy approach is needed, one that strengthens Canadian industry, lowers costs, and supports both economic growth and environmental responsibility. A practical, export-focused Canadian energy strategy could resolve these issues and enhance global impact. Poilievre proposes leveraging Canada's abundant natural gas reserves and nuclear energy to supply markets in Asia, displacing coal-fired power generation and reducing global carbon emissions significantly. By aligning energy policy with economic and environmental realities rather than strict ideological limits, Canada could simultaneously create well-paying jobs, attract international investment, and demonstrate responsible environmental leadership. Such a strategy would allow Canada to strengthen its position as a competitive, influential player on the global stage while supporting both domestic prosperity and climate goals. Carney's inconsistent stance on pipelines underscores broader policy contradictions within his administration. In the past, he testified against major projects, while today, his advisors continue to advocate caution, discouraging ambitious energy initiatives. This vegetarian in a steakhouse approach prevents Canada from fully leveraging its low-cost, low-emission energy resources. Poilievre stresses that a consistent, practical, and evidence-based energy policy would not only enhance economic growth, but also achieve measurable environmental benefits, creating a win-win scenario for both domestic prosperity and international credibility in energy leadership. The international context further emphasizes the stakes for Canada and its allies. Former U.S. President Donald Trump recently addressed NATO nations in a letter highlighting the strategic importance of energy for global security. He called for strong sanctions on Russian oil while emphasizing Canada's untapped potential as a reliable energy supplier capable of supporting allied nations. Trump's warning illustrates that continued Canadian inaction diminishes its ability to reinforce alliances, reduces bargaining power in international negotiations, and weakens influence in key global energy markets, leaving the country at a strategic disadvantage amid geopolitical tensions. Poilievre seizes this moment to stress the consequences of Canada's regulatory inertia, arguing that it costs the nation billions in potential revenue and erodes investor confidence. While Trump advocates decisive, coordinated energy strategies to counter Russian and Chinese influence, Carney's restrictive policies continue to stifle Canadian energy development. The contrast between bold international leadership and cautious domestic paralysis exposes a dangerous gap in Canadian energy policy, economic planning, and global strategic positioning, highlighting the urgent need for reforms that prioritize actionable results over bureaucratic appearances. In summary, Poilievre's critique of Carney focuses on four major issues: the conflation of activity with achievement, regulatory and legislative barriers that slow private sector initiatives, underutilized energy resources, leaving allies dependent on authoritarian states, and policies that inadvertently empower global rivals like China and Russia. Conservatives argue for clear federal signals to investors, accelerated permitting, and export-driven energy strategies that simultaneously support economic growth, job creation, and measurable environmental benefits, positioning Canada as a reliable economic and strategic partner on the global stage. Until Carney removes these regulatory and bureaucratic obstacles, Poilievre warns that Canada risks continued economic stagnation, lost investment, and reduced international influence. The call is for pragmatic leadership that prioritizes tangible results over appearances, leverages domestic energy resources responsibly, and positions Canada as both a dependable economic partner and a meaningful contributor to global energy security, ensuring that future policies support sustainable growth, investor confidence, and long-term international credibility.